All right, folks, welcome back to the Plain Fun RC channel as we continue with our update on the ACR Composites 40% pond racer. So what we're doing right now, these are the hatches that you would remove to be able to access the bolts to bolt on the wing and also to bolt on the pod to the center section here, center wing. Initially, I was going to use latches to hold it in place. But the problem is with these is that these are curved. I don't know if you can see the curvature or not. But because they're curved, what would have happened is we would have had a latch here and a latch here, which would have been fine. I'm sure would have kept it in place. But these ends would have still lifted up a little bit. So in order to keep this down so the wind doesn't catch it and rip it right off, especially at the speeds it'll travel, decided to go ahead and go with 7. Here we go. 7, number 3, servo screw 7/16, and we're just using a good old Dremel just to drill a 1/16 drill hole in the panels themselves. It's not always the most convenient way because you have to unscrew this anytime you need to get at the bolts, but it's the best way to make sure this hatch does not come off. And the way I did it, give you an example here. We centered the hatch. Let me go back over here for 1 second. So you'll see there's already these grooves that are already manufactured into the actual pod itself. So when you're putting on the hatch, you want to make sure the hatch is nice and centered with regards to those grooves. And then you'll take some good old blue painter's tape, secure it in place, and then just go ahead and then drill your 7 holes. Now I drilled 7 because I found that even when I put these 2 right here, this center portion was still up a little bit. So by putting one right here, that'll keep it down. That way the wind won't catch it and rip it off. Pretty straightforward. So that's pretty much it for that. And what we're going to do though now is we're going to move on to the battery hatches themselves. Now when we do the battery hatches, we're going to make them the same open width as this, and we'll do it in the area here, the area that we had put the additional carbon fiber in. So that width is perfect. I can easily get my hand in there, and they won't be as long this way. They won't need to be as long. Plus they can't be that long. But we'll make them a good length, and then we'll just tape it off with the blue painter's tape, and then we'll move on from there. All right, more to come. All right, folks, continuing on with the pond racer, and we're focusing on battery hatches. Let me talk to you about what we did here, so this will help you in case you're trying to do some kind of conversion, really with any airplane for that matter. So first of all, the tape here, that outlines the actual hatch itself. Now, when you go and cut the hatch, the first thing you're going to cut are the sides, here and here. Now, before you cut the front and the rear of the hatch, take a moment, put some tape over top of it here and here. That holds the hatch in place, so as you're cutting, it doesn't drop in and you get an uneven cut. And then once you're done with that, then you might have to get a little tiny saw, maybe cut the edges so it's nice and close so to free it up. But after that, you can see it's done. This one wasn't quite straight enough. It went off just a little bit, but the other one over here looks really good. So it came out just fine. So I'm happy with that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get into going through and putting in our latch. Now, initially, I was going to put a latch here and a latch here. Once again, we're talking about the latch. We're talking about the latch you see right up there on the top of the canopy. However, after giving it some thought, I realized that, well, that's a very good way of doing it. The concern is I don't want the hatch to move from side to side. So we're going to be putting in some pieces of dowel here and a piece of a balsa here, so the dowels will slide into the balsa, and that'll help to stabilize the hatch and also help to keep it in place as well. And then what we'll do, we'll probably do underneath here. Let me go on the inside, on the bottom. Oh, there we go. Along, there it is. Up along here, we'll run some 1/64 plywood to seal those gaps in between. This will make more sense as we're going along. Anyway, so that's where we are, and more to come. All right, folks, continuing on. So you can see our hatch has been cut. It's beautifully cut, by the way, just perfect. The width and the space, easy to get your hand in there, which is fantastic. Here's the hatch itself, and you can see the bottom where we did the actual additional carbon fiber. That came out really well. Really happy with that. Very stiff, very sturdy. And let's take a look on the inside, because one of the biggest reasons why we went ahead and added the additional carbon fiber was to reinforce. And you can see when I pan back or come back just a little bit, you can see the additional carbon fiber, and it's absolutely perfect. It covers the area surrounding the actual hatch itself, so there's not going to be any loss in rigidity whatsoever. Let me see if I can get in there to the front a little bit. Well, not so much. Anyway, you get the gist. So very happy with that. That came out perfect. So now let's go ahead and do the other parts to get this thing in place. All right, folks, continuing with our update here with the ACR Composites 40% pond racer. So here is our first hatch. This is going to be for this this pod right here. And you can see this is what we're looking at is the rear. This is the front up here. But you can see the latch that we have here. Took a little bit of measuring, and you can see how we have it set up. We've cut a little notch right there, and we have, these are 256 screws that have gone through there, as you can see, and it works great. Let me see if I can just set this down for a second. And what we're looking for is for that pin to disappear underneath the actual hatch, and there you go. You can see only a very small amount sticks out. That's perfect, because what's going to happen, there's going to be a separate piece of wood here on the actual pod itself that pin is going to go into. So it's important that this pin slides all the way, all the way underneath, so that way it will clear the wood and therefore make it easy to lift off the airplane. Now for the front, I've been given a lot of thought for the front. Initially I said we were going to do a couple dowels here and here, but I have an idea. I think what we're going to do, and I don't know if this is going to work, I've never tried it, is, let me come over here. So we'll put a piece of wood here so it sits like this, and a piece of wood here so it sits like this. And then we'll do the same thing on the front underneath. We'll put a piece of wood right here. So my thought is that basically what will happen is this piece of wood here will keep the hatch from being lifted up. These pieces of wood here, here, and here will keep the hatch from dropping down. So it should keep it in place nice and tight, hopefully. I've never tried it before, but I thought, let me give it a shot and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we can just take them off and then go ahead and put the dowels in. But anyway, so we're gonna, before we go and start doing that, I'm gonna take the other hatch that's sitting over there, right there, and I'm gonna mirror the process for this, and then we'll get the other latch on the hatch. All right, more to come. All right, folks, continuing on with our installation of the hatch in our ARC Composites pond racer. So we've got our little hatch latch fully installed. A couple things I want to point out to you. First of all, it's very important that when you install this type of hatch, notice how we put some washers in there. You'll notice on one side there's 2 washers for each of the screws, and on the opposite there's only 1 washer for the screws. You can see it right there. The reason for that, if you look carefully at the carbon fiber, you'll notice there's a bit of a hump there. That's the seam, and so that's why there's a bit of a hump there. So in order to sort of even out the hatch pin, you need to go ahead and just put 2 washers on one side, 1 on the other, and you can see it's nice and level. Now, one other thing you want to keep in mind too, make sure that when you have this fully installed, okay, obviously you have your nuts there as well, but also you're going to need a little bit of oil. A little bit of oil on the shaft here, on this part here, and then right back there. And then there's a pin. I'll pull this back the best I can, and you're going to see that if you look very carefully, there's a pin, a very tiny pin right there pointing upward. That's a guide pin. That one, you just a tiny drop of oil, a very, very small amount. Don't put too much on there, and it's nice and smooth. So it works perfect. This is absolutely perfect in every way. So that's done. that's finished. We're going to go ahead and get onto the other one as well. We're going to duplicate the process that we just did. And then after that, then we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the other parts that we need to put in the actual pod to hold the hatch in place. All right, more to come. All right, folks, continue with our update very quickly. I don't know if I mentioned this in the beginning, but these are the latches we're using, and you can get these from f3aunlimited.com. So if you're looking for them, they are there, and they're only a couple dollars. We're working on our second hatch there. We've got our slot cut, and now we're going to go ahead and drill our holes to mount the actual latch. All right, more to come. All right, folks, we're continuing on with our hatch install for the ACR Composites pond racer. We have our second latch. Very good. Everything worked really well. I made a small error. I started cutting the hole on this end, which is the wrong end, so it was actually this end. But outside of that, that was pretty good, fine. You know, the same technique. We've got just one washer on one side, as you can see there, to space the latch out from the actual hatch. And the other side we have two, and so that leveled it out. And you can see, for the most part, when you look at the actual latch itself in relation to the center line here, you can see it is actually pretty damn straight. It's off just a little bit to the right, not much, just a touch. So I'm fine with that. That's fine. It is important to get it as straight as possible, because when you go to drill the hole in the piece of wood that pin is going to be going into, you know, you want to try to get that drilled as straight as possible, and therefore this latch needs to be as straight as possible so the pin goes in without any difficulty. Anyway, that's it for that. So we've got our latches installed for both our hatches, and then from there we're going to go ahead and start up on the actual pods themselves, as we talked about a little bit ago. Getting the wood in there, back in this part here, so the pin has a place to go into, and then of course we've got to do something up here on the front. So the hatch doesn't just drop right in, and fall to the bottom. All right, more to come. All right, folks, continuing with our update for the pond racer here. We're working on the battery hatch. So let me talk about what we did here. So you'll notice that this is the hatch for this pod right here. Let's talk about what we did. So you'll see here I've got 3/4-inch spruce pieces. These two that are here help prevent the hatch from going like this. And then the one in the center here will slide in between these two here to help keep it centered. Initially, I didn't have the centerpiece in place, and I noticed that what was happening is this hatch was shifting side to side. I thought I'd try something a little different. Normally, what I would do is I would take a piece like this, put it up front here, and then have two dowels here, okay? Going one here and then one through here, and then you would simply just take the hatch, pass the dowel, pass it through like this. The dowel slide into a piece that looks exactly like this, and then you just set it down and then go ahead and pull your hatch pin to put it in place. I thought I'd try something a little different. It works. It's all right. You know, with all the work that I had to do to put it in, honestly, I could have just gone ahead and just put the piece in here and then use the dowels. And I think what I might do, instead of duplicating this technique on this hatch over here, I think I'm just going to go with the dowel technique, and that's okay, because I need to distinguish these two hatches from each other, because this one is for pod number 2, which is this pod right here, and this one is for pod number 1, which is for this pod over here. So I think that's one way, a simple way of distinguishing the two of them. And anyway, so this one's basically done, and this one's taken care of for right now. So now we're going to go ahead and just work on this one right here. All right. So more to come. All right, folks, continuing with the pond racer battery hatch installation. So what I did here is we've got our pod number 2 hatch, and we have our piece of wood here that is supporting the two inserts that will go into the holes that were created there. You can see it right there, and that'll help hold that in place. So I used two different techniques to put the hatch on. Obviously, we've got this technique here, and of course the one that I showed you yesterday, or just a little bit ago, with regards to this hatch over here. I would say of the two, this is probably the simpler in terms of putting it together. And by having the pins spaced far out, that will prevent the hatch from twisting side to side. So if you're going to do a battery hatch, that's what I would recommend. Latch back here, and a piece of wood here, and then your dowels, carbon fiber dowels here, and that'll help hold it in place and keep it from moving side to side. The epoxy's drying. When that's done, we'll put it in, and then the hatches will be finished. All right, more to come. All right, folks, continuing on with our battery hatch install. You can see we've got our carbon fiber rods there. They're about I'm gonna say 5/64, very small, but you don't need anything all that big, especially with carbon fiber because it's so stiff. This is fantastic. Now I did have to make the holes just a little bit bigger than 5/64 to accommodate it, but you can see. Let me go ahead and get this in. 1 second. Line those holes up. There we go. And in the front, beautiful. And now back here, we're going to pull back on this. And we're going to let that go. Perfect. There you go. And we've got a really nice hatch. Very sturdy side to side. You can see it's not moving. And we're done. So what we need to do now is we're now going to start diving into the installation of the actual battery trays down here. Get that in place. And we're just moving along like grease lightning. So more to come.